17-year-old Emily Carter wasn't a runaway or a rebel. She rode the same route home every day. But on a burning August afternoon in 1983, she vanished, leaving only a bicycle placed so neatly it felt staged. No screams, no struggle, just a silent Texas back road holding its secrets. Neighbors whispered about a brown pickup circling twice. A key witness statement disappeared from the file. For decades, the case sat frozen, until a cold case detective found a detail that never should have been missing. That single clue cracked open a truth someone hid for 36 years, and it pointed straight at a person the town trusted. If you're into dark mysteries and buried twists, hit like, subscribe, and stay with me. What happened to Emily didn't just break the case. What follows will shake you.
The first thing you need to know about Nolan Creek Road is this. Nothing ever happens there. It's a quiet stretch on the edge of Killeen, Texas. The kind of road people pass without thinking twice. But on a hot August afternoon in 1983, that quiet road swallowed a 17-year-old girl whole. And for decades, nobody could explain how Emily Carter left her house for a short ride home. She never made it. In a town where neighbors waved at each other from their porches, her disappearance hit like a sudden blackout. One moment she existed in the world. The next, she was simply gone. No struggle, no weaknesses. Just a bicycle placed almost too neatly in the dirt, staring back at officers like a dare. And that's the mystery we're about to unravel, how a normal day in Texas turned into one of the most baffling disappearances the town ever faced. Killeen in 1983 wasn't the kind of place people feared. It was military families, dusty diners, and neighbors who knew each other's dogs by name. Life moved slow, steady, predictable. Folks trusted the sidewalks, trusted the streets, trusted the idea that bad things only happened somewhere else. But that summer carried a strange heaviness, a heat that made people restless. There were whispers of break-ins on the edges of town, cars cruising the back roads a little too late, faces nobody recognized lingering near convenience stores. Still, nothing felt dangerous enough to spark real panic. So when Emily pedaled out into that warm Texas air, nobody imagined the safety net of this town was already tearing and that the smallest loose thread had been pulled without anyone noticing. Emily Carter wasn't a mystery when she was alive. She was the kid who volunteered at the animal shelter, the girl who aced English class, the teenager who dreamed of journalism and carried a camera everywhere. People liked her instantly. She had that effortless calm, the kind that made adults trust her and classmates gravitate toward her. But what stood out most was her intuition. Emily noticed everything shifts in someone's tone. A car that didn't belong. A glance that lingered too long. She saw details others ignored. And maybe that was the problem. Maybe she noticed something she was an disappearance, something that belonged to a world outside Killeen's safe bubble when she vanished. T-Town didn't just lose a teenager. It lost a bright, sharp observer who might have understood exactly what was coming long before anyone else. Emily left her friend's house just before sunset, planning to be home in 10 minutes. She took Nolan Creek Road because it was faster, quieter, familiar. But somewhere along that stretch, something intercepted her path. A passing driver later reported seeing a brown pickup pulled slightly off the shoulder. Engine running. No one thought much of it then. Trucks were everywhere in Texas. But the timing, the placement. The silence around that moment would grow heavier with every year. There were no signs of a fight. No skid marks. No footprints suggesting she ran. It was as if the horizon swallowed her before the sun even dipped. By the time her parents called the police, night had settled hard, and the road felt eerie too. Still, too expectant. Officers walked the gravel and brush with flashlights, but the darkness held its secrets tight. The next morning, officers found Emily's bicycle lying on its side at a clean angle. No dirt on the tires, no scuffing, no crash marks. It looked placed, almost arranged, like someone wanted it discovered, but nothing else. Investigators took one look at that bike and knew it didn't match. The chaos of a real abduction. A terrified victim doesn't carefully set her ride on the ground. A predator doesn't leave evidence in perfect condition, unless there's a reason. What bothered them more was the track pattern. The bike's tire marks stopped abruptly, as if lifted, not dropped. And the surrounding brush. Undisturbed. Not a single broken twig. It felt stacked. Theatrical, like someone recreated a scene from memory. instead of leaving behind the real one. That was the first clue that whoever took Emily wasn't reckless. They were meticulous, methodical, prepared. Within weeks, the investigation hit a wall. Witnesses contradicted each other. Rumors drowned. Rumors. Leads fizzled out as quickly as they came in. Killeen didn't have the forensic tech, the databases, or the experience to chase a suspect who clearly understood how to leave no trail. Most officers eventually accepted the painful truth. There was nothing more they could do. The case was boxed, labeled, and pushed into the cold case room where dust settles faster than justice. But not for Detective Ray Hollis. He was young then, new to the department, stubborn enough to believe every puzzle could be solved if you dug deep enough. Something about Emily's bike. Something about that missing gap in the timeline, he couldn't let it go. For years, he revisited the file in secret, convinced a crucial detail had been buried, accidentally or intentionally. And he wasn't wrong. The single piece that could flip the entire case was out there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the day someone finally came looking with the right eyes. 3 decades later, while digitizing old archives, Detective Ray Hollis found a thin, wrinkled page wedged inside the wrong folder. It wasn't labeled. It wasn't stamped. It wasn't even logged in the evidence index. But the heading at the top froze him. Witness account, August 14th, 1983. The signature belonged to a man named Warren Pike, a mechanic who lived near Nolan Creek Road. Pike claimed he'd seen something the night Emily disappeared, something he wasn't sure would matter. According to his statement, a brown pickup had idled on the shoulder just after sunset, hazard lights faintly glowing. He saw a silhouette standing beside it, facing the tree line, like they were waiting, or watching. What bothered Hollis wasn't just what Pike saw. It was the fact that this document had never been entered into the case file. A statement this important doesn't vanish by accident. Someone misplaced it or someone removed it. And now, 36 years later, it had resurfaced at the perfect moment. Hollis tracked down Warren Pike, now in his 70s and living quietly outside Belton. The old man answered the door with a cautious stare, as if he'd been expecting this visit his entire life. When Hollis mentioned Emily Carter, Pike exhaled slowly and nodded. He remembered every detail. The pickup wasn't just brown, it was faded, almost patchy, like the paint had been stripped by sun and time. The truck circled the area twice before stopping, its drivers scanning the road like they were hunting for something familiar. Pike heard a door slam, then a quick, sharp, metallic click. Maybe a toolbox, maybe something worse. Back in 1983, Pike reported it. Officers thanked him and told him someone would follow up. No one ever did. He assumed the detail wasn't important. After all, it was just a truck in Texas. But as he described the driver's posture, the way the truck angled toward the brush, and the uneasy silence of that moment, Hollis felt certainty settle in his chest. This wasn't a random sighting. This was the turning point everyone had missed. Once Pike's memories reopened the door, Hollis dove back into the 1983 logs, and that's when everything snapped into focus. A second search team had been dispatched to the night Emily Vanista detailed the primary case file barely mentioned. Their field notes should have been stored alongside the main report, but the folder was empty. No maps, no photos, no timestamps, just blank space where evidence should have lived. Hollis requested access to the original storage vault, the one older officers jokingly called the graveyard. He found a worn box mislabeled under a different case number. Inside were pages torn from a notebook, dirt smudged across the edges. They detailed tire impressions near the site, impressions wider and deeper than Emily's bicycle could have made. Someone knew this back then. Someone wrote it down, and someone deliberately ensured it never shaped the investigation. The picture was shifting, not because of new clues, but because forgotten ones were finally being allowed to speak. Old witness statements usually lead nowhere. But the brown pickup Pike described had one unique detail. The plate was missing a bolt, causing it to hang crooked. He remembered the first 2 letters. BL, because they reminded him of blue, even though the truck wasn't blue at all. Hollis fed that sliver of information into 2019's digitized license plate archives. Databases lighters, more powerful than anything investigators had in the 80s. The system couldn't locate the exact plate, but it found a pattern. Only 3 trucks in Bell County during that year matched the color, body type, and partial plate. 2 belonged to 2 known ranchers with solid alibis. The third belonged to a name Hollis, barely recognized Earl Vickers, a volunteer firefighter who'd moved away years after Emily vanished. No criminal record, no complaints, no reason, on paper, to suspect him. But the databases didn't care about reputations. They cared about patterns. And this pattern was pointing directly at a man who'd lived only 12 minutes from Nolan Creek Road. Earl Vickers wasn't the type of man who drew attention. In 1983, he lived in a modest 1-story home on the outskirts of Killeen, worked part-time at a feed store, and volunteered at the local fire station. People described him as mild, polite, even helpful. He was the guy who offered to fix your fence or haul your hay bales without asking for payment. But Hollis wasn't looking for a friendly face. He was looking for behavior, patterns, movements, absences, strange coincidences, hiding behind normal routines. And Vickers had one. He frequently drove Nolan Creek Road at sunset. He claimed it was the fastest way home. There were no complaints against him, no recorded conflicts with Emily's family, nothing that screamed motive. But when Hollis reviewed old dispatch sheets, he found something off. On the night Emily vanished, Vickers' name appeared on the volunteer roster, yet he never checked in. A missing check-in might be nothing, or it might be the break the case needed in a box marked unrelated evidence. Hollis discovered a dusty camcorder from a property search conducted the week after Emily disappeared. It belonged to a teenager who often filmed cars speeding down the back roads. Investigators dismissed it decades ago to grainy, too shaky, too dark. But technology had changed. Modern enhancement software could pull details out of images once written off as static. Hollis sent the tape for digital reconstruction, expecting little. What came back made him sit upright. A frame only a fraction of a second showed a brown pickup with a plate hanging crooked and a driver leaning forward, watching the road. The timestamp aligned nearly perfectly with Pike's witness account. It wasn't enough to prove guilt, but it was enough to prove presence. Vickers had been exactly where he claimed he wasn't. And if he lied about that, what else had he lied about? As Hollis dug deeper, a troubling pattern surfaced. Vickers' name quietly threaded through several local incidents, nothing violent, nothing overtly criminal, but just close enough to raise suspicion. A teenage girl reported a man in a brown truck slowing near her bus stop in late July 1983. A convenience store clerk remembered a customer who lingered too long, watching young customers come and go. A neighbor recalled seeing Vickers cleaning out the bed of his truck late at night the week Emily vanished. Individually, these pieces seemed harmless. Together, they formed a chilling outline. A man who blended in, observed, waited. When Hollis tried to pull Vickers' old firefighter logs, another wall appeared, several pages missing, entries scratched out, dates overwritten. Someone had altered records, whether to protect Vickers or to cover a collective oversight. Nobody knew. But what Hollis did know was this. The deeper the case went, the more the past fought back. It felt like the town itself had buried something, and now that truth was clawing its way to the surface. Just when momentum surged, everything collapsed. The digital enhancement team reported that the camcorder footage couldn't be used in court, too low in resolution, too unstable for a positive ID. Pike's memory, while powerful, wasn't considered legally reliable after 36 years. And the missing logs. Without proof, they were intentionally altered. They were dismissed as clerical errors. The district attorney closed the door hard. Not enough evidence to pursue. Circumstantial at best. For the first time in decades, Hollis felt his resolve crack. He'd pushed through dead ends before, but this time the trail seemed to dissolve in his hands. Every lead felt like sand slipping through his fingers. He returned to the case room late that night, staring at Emily's bicycle photo, the same image he'd looked at since he was a rookie. And for a moment, he wondered if the answers he'd chased his whole career was simply never meant to surface. But the case wasn't done with him yet. Something inside those old files was still waiting. Every August, the town held a small vigil for Emily Condell's photos and prayers whispered into warm Texas air. Most who attended had known the Carter family for years. But in 2011, someone new showed up. A woman in her late 40s, standing at the edge of the crowd, keeping her head low beneath a denim cap. She never approached the family, never spoke to detectives, never signed the memory board. She just stood there, staring at Emily's picture like she was absorbing every detail. When officers approached, she slipped away before they could ask a single question. Some thought she resembled Emily, others dismissed it as wishful thinking. But later, when the surveillance footage was reviewed, frame by investigators noticed something unsettling. She walked with the same slight inward turn of the right foot, the same gait Emily had as a teenager. On a quiet morning in 2014, the Carter family home phone rang. Caller ID read unknown, something they had grown used to, but when Emily's mother answered, her heart nearly stopped. The voice on the other end was soft, breathy, trembling, and unmistakably familiar. "Mom?" "I didn't mean to leave." The call lasted only 12 seconds. Police traced it to a payphone 3 towns away, one of the last still standing. The security camera facing the booth had been out for weeks. Coincidence. Or sabotaje? But voice analysis confirmed what the family already believed. Deep down, the vocal pattern matched Emily's recordings from 1983 with a 92% similarity score. Impossible, the expert said voice's age. De Ichin, unless the speaker had been kept somewhere isolated, or alive under conditions no one could imagine. When investigators reopened the case in 2017, a new tip led them to a property just 5 miles from where Emily vanished. The house had belonged to a reclusive mechanic who died years earlier. Nothing seemed unusual until a cadaver dog alerted to the floorboards of the old workshop. Beneath the planks, officers discovered a hidden room airtight, windowless, with a reinforced steel door that locked only from the outside. On a small rusted desk lay a stack of yellowed newspapers, all about Emily's disappearance. But the most disturbing find was a blanket with DNA traces matching the Carter family. No remains, no signs of struggle, just an eerie sense that someone had lived down there, or had been kept down there. For how long? And why did the room contain a working landline, one that had been connected until 2014? As detectives dug deeper, they uncovered a truth the town had buried for decades. The mechanic wasn't the only suspect. He was part of a small, tight-lipped group of men who'd been reported multiple times for following young girls in the late 70s and early 80s. Segundo's complaints were dismissed, covered up, or lost. Some of the officers handling those reports later resigned quietly. One moved out of state. One took early retirement. Another became increasingly hostile whenever Emily's name surfaced. It wasn't one monster, it was a circle. A network that operated in the shadows of a place everyone thought was safe, but secret, rot. And by 2018, survivors from nearby towns began stepping forward with eerily similar stories: abductions, isolation, manipulation, and escape attempts that mirrored Emily's timeline. If Emily had survived, she wasn't just a missing girl. She was the missing witness to something much larger. In early 2019, a woman named Marissa Tate requested a private meeting with investigators. She was 46, nervous, and carried a file of handwritten notes that shook the room. Marissa revealed she had been abducted in 1985, 2 years after Emily, held captive for nearly 8 months in an underground space that sounded painfully similar to the hidden room detectives had uncovered. She described a strict routine, a rotating presence of masked men, and a rule: survivors were released only when they obeyed. But the detail that stopped everyone cold was this: Marissa claimed there was another girl held before her. A girl with long brown hair who talked about missing her bike. She called herself Emily, or Emma, something like that, Marissa whispered. If her memory was real, Emily didn't die in 1983. She survived long enough to be replaced. As Marissa's testimony spread through the reopened task force, analysts combed through decades of missing person reports from surrounding counties. A pattern emerged every 18 to 30 months. A teenage girl vanished within a 40-mile radius. The disappearances stopped abruptly in 2014, the same year Emily's mother received that haunting 12-second phone call. One detective noticed something odd. The payphone used for the call was repaired by a local contractor 2 days before. Records showed only one technician had access to that line. His name matched someone who lived beside the mechanic in the late 80 segundos, and who abruptly moved to New Mexico in 2015. When investigators tracked him down, neighbors reported hearing strange late-night phone calls coming from his garage, the kind where only one person speaks and the other whispers. Something was pulling this case toward the present, not the past. In 2020, a breakthrough arrived from a routine genealogy sweep. A lab reported a partial DNA match to Emily Suman alive, female, and approximately 50 years old. The profile didn't match Emilia's immediate family, meaning the individual could be Emily herself, or someone closely related. The match came from a voluntary ancestry kit registered under the name Jane L. The address tied to that kit belonged to a women's rehabilitation home in Arizona. When detectives visited, the staff described Jane as quiet, anxious, and prone to nightmares. She didn't remember her childhood, didn't trust men, and refused to speak on camera. But one detail made the lead impossible to ignore. Jane arrived at the facility in 2014, injured, and carrying nothing but a single key. The same unique model used for the underground room's exterior lock. Could Jane be Emily, or the last surviving witness? By late 2021, the investigation had come full circle. Detectives returned to Nolan Creek Road, the place where Emily vanished nearly 4 decades earlier. With new technology, drones scanned the surrounding fields, picking up anomalies that weren't visible in the 80 segundos beneath layers of soil and roots. Lay the remains of an old access tunnel, collapsed long ago. The tunnel stretched toward the mechanic's property, confirming that Emily may never have been taken by force. She may have been lured. The team stood silently as the evening light fell over the road. For the first time, the path of her disappearance felt tangible. Everything pointed to one conclusion. Emily didn't vanish into thin air. She was funneled, hidden, and moved through a system designed to erase her. And someone who knew that system was still alive, watching investigators get closer than ever before. By 2022, Detective Ray Hollis had spent nearly 40 years chasing this case. Friends retired. Colleagues moved on. He didn't. He carried Emily's face in his mind like a constant reminder of every detail, every misstep, every overlooked clue. The cold case files were no longer paper, they were digital, mapped, cross-referenced, and connected. Hollis reviewed every tip, every witness, every scrap of evidence with surgical precision. He knew the answers were hidden in the details no one else considered important. The minor discrepancies in volunteer logs, the faint tire tracks preserved in photographs, the overlooked witness statement from 1983. Sleep became a stranger. His house smelled like old files and coffee. And yet, despite frustration, doubt, and pressure from the department to close the case, Hollis felt one undeniable truth. Emily's story wasn't finished, and he would see it through to the end, no matter how long it took or how dark the path became. A week later, Hollis received a tip about an old gas station surveillance reel from 1983. The original tape had been archived in poor condition, ignored for decades. Modern enhancement technology allowed the team to reconstruct the frames. At first, it looked like static, but then a flash of movement appeared. A brown pickup with a woman standing near the driver's side, her posture rigid, her gaze fixed straight ahead. Hollis. That silhouette, her hair, her height. Her stance matched every description of Emily. The timestamp coincided with the night she vanished. It wasn't proof, not yet, but it was enough to reopen the conversation. The investigation now had a visual link spanning decades, a ghostly frame connecting a past disappearance to a present lead. And suddenly, everything felt closer, more real, and more urgent than it ever had in the cold case files. Hollis and his team tracked Earl Vickers' last known location, a decaying farmhouse surrounded by scrubland and mesquite, the air heavy with the scent of earth and history. Approaching cautiously, officers noted the faint sound of metal scraping from the rear shed. They called his name. Silence. Then a door creaked. Vickers appeared older, frail, but with a stubborn gaze that had never left him. Hollis confronted him with evidence, witness statements, and enhanced footage. At first, Vickers laughed nervously, deflecting, denying, and hinting that it was all just a long time ago. But the layers of investigation, the DNA, the underground room, Marissa's testimony, the partial footage compressed into a weight he could no longer ignore. His demeanor shifted from arrogant calm to trembling acknowledgement. The confession began quietly, almost inaudible, but each word peeled back decades of fear, secrecy, and manipulation. Finally, Emily's story, long silenced, was spoken aloud. After decades of searching, waiting, and wondering, Emily, or Jane, as she was now called, returned to Nolan Creek Road, not as a lost girl, but as a survivor. The town, older and quieter than it had been in 1983, welcomed the closure cautiously. Families who had whispered of nightmares and disappearances began to breathe again. For Hollis, walking along the road where the first bicycle had fallen, the wind carried more than the dry Texas heat. It carried relief, resolution, and a quiet triumph. Emily's memories were fragmented, her trauma immense, but the truth was finally hers to claim. And for the first time, the road that had swallowed her became a place of return, not disappearance. The town's darkest secret had been revealed, the network of shadows dismantled, and a girl lost to history was now reclaiming the story of her life on her own terms, in her own words, and finally, free.